Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining me today. I'm sorry I didn't get this video out sooner. I just came back from Arizona. We were for a friend's graduation, so I didn't actually get to watch this live. I had to go back and listen to this on the drive back from Arizona and kind of on the drive to there as well, but mostly the drive back. And then, between this entire week that's been going on, I've been able to listen to the rest of it. So I just really wanted to get into the annual shareholders meeting, what I thought, and just 3 takeaways that I really had. And again, there's a lot of knowledge in these, shareholder meetings. So if you have time, just put it on like 1.5 speed, 1.75 speed, and just listen in. There's also a transcript on CNBC's website. I'm really hoping that this doesn't get taken down, but I think we won't have any issues here. But I think that overall, the amount of knowledge that they share every single year is definitely worth the listen, definitely worth the watch. And if you haven't ever seen this before, welcome. You're about to see some Q&A from Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. It's amazing that they're doing it at 90 years old. It really top of the 90s actually is really what they are. But with that being said, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's dive right into the 3 takeaways. And also, if you want to read it instead, there's a Substack link down below. But with that being said, let's dive right into it. And again, as I said, I'm going to listen to this at 1.5 times speed. If you think it sounds a little bit weird, it's because of the 1.5 times speed. Sorry ahead of time. It's a little slow, obviously. But I feel like this is kind of the important information.
Hi, my name is Jala Z. I'm from Santa Clara, California. And my question is to Charlie and Warren. Given the rise of disruptive technologies that can improve productivity significantly, and AI being one of them, how do you envision the future of value investing in this new era? And what adaptations or new principles do you think investors should adopt? And any recommendations for investors to remain successful in this rapid changing landscape? Thank you.
That's a good question.
I'm glad to take that one. I think value investors are going to have a harder time now that there's so many of them competing for a diminished bunch of opportunities. So my advice to value investors is to get used to making less.
And Charlie has been telling me the same thing the whole time we've known each other. I mean, we get along wonderfully because...
So we are making less.
Yeah, well, but that mostly, I think, is because it's larger.
When we were younger.
No, we never thought we could manage $508 billion.
No,
or whatever, but I would argue that there's going to be plenty of opportunities. And part of the reason there are going to be plenty of opportunities, the tech doesn't make any difference or any of that. I mean, if you look at how the world's changed in the years since 1942 when I started, you'd say, well, how does a kid that doesn't know anything about airplanes, that doesn't know anything about engines and cars, and doesn't know anything about electricity and all that? But that really isn't that's not the world changing or new things coming along don't take away the opportunities. What gives you opportunities is other people doing dumb things. And and I would say that, well, the 58 years we've been running Berkshire, I would say there's been a great increase in the number of people doing dumb things, and they do big dumb things, and the reason they do it to some extent is because they can get money from other people so much easier than when we started. So you could start 10 or 15 dumb insurance companies in the last 10 years, and you could become rich if you were adroit at it, whether the business succeeded or not, and the underwriters got paid, and the lawyers got paid, and that creates, if that's done on a large scale, which it couldn't be done 58 years ago, you couldn't get the money to do some of the dumb things that we wanted to do, fortunately. So I think that investing has disappeared so much from this huge capitalistic market that anybody can play in, but that the big money is in selling other people ideas. It isn't outperforming. And I think if you don't run too much money, which we do, but if you're running small amounts of money, I think the opportunities will be greater. But then Charlie and I have always differed on this subject. He likes to tell me how gloomy the world is, and I like to tell him we'll find something. And so far we've both been kind of right. Charlie, will you budge an inch on that or not?
There is so much money now in the hands of so many smart people, all trying to outsmart one another and outpromote one another, getting more money out of other people. And it's a radically different world from the world we started in. And I suppose it will have its opportunities, but it's also going to have some unpleasant episodes.
But they're trying to outsmart each other in arenas that you don't have to play. I mean, if you look at that government bond market, the Treasury bill market, I mean, you've got this one bill that's out of line with the others. We went over $3 billion of it the other day. But those are people. The world is overwhelmingly short-term focused. And if you go to an investor relations call, they're all trying to figure out how to fill out a sheet to show the earnings for the year. And the management is interested in feeding them expectations that will slightly be beaten. I mean, that is a world that's made to order for anybody that's trying to think about what you do that should work over 5 or 10 or 20 years. And I just think that I would love to be born today and go out with not too much money and hopefully turn it into a lot of money. And Charlie would too, actually. He would find something to do, I will just guarantee you. And it wouldn't be exactly the same as before, but he would have a big pile.
I would not.
So I'm going to stop it right there because there's really nothing else to add to that. But I just felt like one of the key things in a lot of this and kind of what he goes on about is the fact that people are so short-term minded that your opportunity is not going to come from, finding the next AI play, finding the next, SPAC that comes out or whatever. And again, not that there aren't opportunities in these things, but what he's saying is that the opportunity realistically for them and for a lot of other, medium to large size funds is going to be people being scared, people getting in and out of things for no really good reason. And even as value investors ourselves, if you're investing in small caps, micro caps, large caps, mega caps, whatever it is, there's always going to be something somewhere. Someone's going to get scared. Some news article is going to come out. I mean, you saw what happened with Meta. It went up practically 100% almost from $80 to about $230, And you have Google who, ChatGPT comes out. People get scared of Google, sell it down just a little bit, and now it's back above 100. So, again, that's a short-term move as far as everything else is concerned, but that's just an example of how fast and how quickly these, sentiments can change back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it's important to find businesses, though, where the economics and the fundamentals of the business model are, very, very strong and have are continuing to grow within their area. And for me personally, one of the things that I'm looking for as far as, opportunities is what is the sentiment around it? Is it bad sentiment because people just don't want it? Or is it bad sentiment because there's actually something that's fundamentally wrong? If you look at a company like First Republic, or if you look at, all the other banks that have kind of come down in that micro space. If you look at some of these banks, Silicon Valley had an obvious determinant that, basically doomed it as soon as people realized what the balance sheet looked like. But you look at other banks that went down alongside of it that may or may not fundamentally be sound. A lot of the big banks like Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank, and JP Morgan all went down on the news of the other banks going down. But in reality, the influx of all those people from Silicon Valley Bank went to these big banks. And so was the downside justified? Maybe, maybe not. We'll have to see how everything plays out over the next few years. But in reality, in the short term, this opportunity is where things can come in. And so that's really what he's saying and how important that is. And the thing is, when you look at fund managers, investment banking, and a lot of asset management companies where you have them, the analysts get on these earnings calls, ask a question. A lot of these questions are based on like, what can I do to tailor my model? How does this, earnings fit my model? What do I need to do to make sure that a number hits? And the thing is, this is on both sides of the coin, both the asset management companies as well as the companies themselves that they're, the stocks that they're holding. Both sides of it are actually trying to do this game of like chicken with each other, where the company's trying to make sure that they beat slightly or above. If they beat a lot, that's fine too. But the asset management companies trying to use their analysts and trying to figure out, okay, what does the next quarter look like? What about the quarter after that? What does the next year look like? They're trying to forecast everything to try to sell more and get a higher fee and compensation, all that good stuff. But that's kind of the key, is you're going to use this short-term fear if something gets sold down a lot. We've had the earnings season pretty much is up at this point, and companies have gone up 20%, gone down 20% in one day on earnings. If that doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't make sense to me either when that happens, because it's kind of, unless there's a one-off expense or one-off charge that happens, something like that shouldn't be so shocking, especially when it's not even fundamentally changing. It's just, hey, our business model may or may not be as strong as it was last year. Well, what was it like 5-10 years ago? It's probably a lot weaker 5-10 years ago than it is today, or at least the cash generation, the revenues, the sales, the net income, all that good stuff. So I thought that was really interesting, but I'll dive on over to the next point.
Hello, my name is Adal Flores, and I've been a shareholder for about 16 years, and I'm coming from Guadalajara, Mexico. My question is for Warren and Charlie. Companies have the eternal dilemma between building products that can make profits and increase their company competitive position. In the best case, you can build products that have both characteristics at the same time, like Google did. But most of the time, companies need to choose between short-term profits and long-term defensibility. For example, Amazon was focused on building their famous Amazon flywheel with limited profits initially in order to obtain stronger network effects with the hope of getting more defensible profits in the future. When you invest, you constantly speak about the importance of building competitive moats. What advice would you give to CEOs about how to balance this dilemma, which is essentially short-term profit versus long-term defensibility? Thank you.
Well, the answer is to control your destiny, which we've been able to do at Berkshire. So we feel no pressure from Wall Street. We don't have investor calls. We don't have to make promises. We get a chance to make our own mistakes and occasionally find something that works well. But we recognize that the people in this room and people like them are the ones that we're working for, and we're not working for a bunch of people that care about whether we meet the quarter estimate or anything. So we have a freedom that we get to use, and we're interested in owning a wonderful business forever. Well, there aren't very many wonderful businesses, but we do learn a lot as we go along. Charlie and I have often mentioned how we learned so much when we bought See's Candy, which we did. But we learned when we bought Ben Rogers' chain of women's dress shops spread all over the eastern part of the country. We learned when we tried getting into the department store business back in 1966, and as the ink was drying on our purchase price, we realized we'd done something dumb. We're learning all the time how consumers behave. I'm not going to be able to learn the technical aspects of businesses, but that'd be nice if I knew it, but it isn't essential. And we are obviously we've got a business at Apple which is larger than our energy business, and we may only own 5.6 or 7%, but our ownership goes up every year. And I don't understand the phone at all, but I do understand consumer behavior, and I know how people think about whether to buy a second car. I know how they go out to different. We own auto dealerships. We're learning all the time from all of our businesses how people react to their animals versus selling them something else. And so See's was a sort of breakthrough, but we just keep learning as to more about how people behave and how a good business can turn into a bad business and how some good businesses can maintain their competitive advantage over time. So we don't have some formula. Berkshire people, but we can also tell in 10 seconds whether it's something of interest. I mean, when I get these calls, and we want to send decks and all that sort of thing, which is nonsense. I mean, it's a bunch of guys sitting that get paid for drawing up these projections of the future and everything like that. If they knew the future, we don't know the future, but we do know certain kinds of businesses. We know what the right price is, and we know what we think we can project out in terms of consumer behavior and consumer and threats to a business, and that's what we've been about, and that's what we'll continue to be about. We don't get smarter over time. We get a little wiser though, following it over time, and you can do it while sitting in the office with a telephone too, which we like. Charlie?
So Charlie didn't end up actually adding too much at the end of that, so I figured, just kind of cut it out. But really what I wanted to point out was the fact that compound investing is compounding in general within investing is something that we talk about a lot. Taking your money, $1, turning it into $2, turning it $3, $4, and so on. Really, though, what I wanted to mention is this idea of compounding is not just something that happens in investing. It also happens with your knowledge, with your experience, with your wisdom, everything on the kind of the soft skills side. So if you're reading books about history, reading books about finance, business, fiction books, nonfiction books, history, whatever it may be, if you're reading these books to learn and you're trying to build up your education, you're actually going to continue to compound that over time. So as he mentioned, they bought See's Candy decades ago. Well, they didn't just buy Apple because of, it was a hot new stock. They bought a couple of years ago, really not even a couple of years, more than, I think it's been a decade now. They bought Apple and they opened this position long after it had started. It had been decades after it had started when they finally invested. Not that they didn't know about it, but they had finally invested when they realized the consumer behavior around a product. And they realized that because of their experiences with auto dealerships, with energy, with See's Candy, with different clothing stores, furniture stores, everything that's in their portfolio, is what they had realized. And so now they took all that knowledge and were able to put a large chunk of their money into Apple. And obviously, we've seen how it's performed today. We've seen what their ownership is like. We've seen the dividends that they're receiving. And if you really think back on, kind of the experience that they've had and things that they've explained about Apple, it's incredible what they were able to see when everyone else thought that Apple was done for. If you go back to the articles from back in that time when they initially started buying, you can see like all the bad sentiment around it. It's kind of crazy to think like that's people thought that Apple was dying, thought it was slowing down, and to look back on it, in hindsight now and look back on the years after they had initiated that purchase, to see what has happened and to see that the culture is built around Apple and just see like how much people really want these Apple products. It's kind of crazy. And it goes back to, the old moats in management and things like that they're looking for. So not only did Warren see something that was of good value, fair value, or what he thought was fair value, he also saw a wonderful business. And the thing is that he took that business and just let it run. He didn't do anything crazy with it. He didn't, split it or stock option this or try to get in and out of it or anything like that. He just put money into it, let it ride, and they continue to hold it today because it's a good business with good fundamentals. And for them, what else are they going to do with that cash besides just leave it to Apple for Apple to continue reinvesting? Now, they do get a dividend as well, but you have to think like the dividend's going to continue growing for Apple, as well as, the business fundamentals in general are going to continue to get better and better and better and better. Now, maybe in the future, something happens where they need to sell off their stake. That's possible. It's always possible. And, there's going to be periods in the future where it's going to, dip really far, or it's going to shoot up way above what it should be valued at. And that's okay. But you'll have to see over time how Berkshire looks at this, as well as the rest of the companies that are in their portfolio. I just think it's really interesting, though, how he kind of went on to mention this. So jumping over to the last point, and then I'll give you some closing remarks.
Good afternoon, Mr. Buffett, Mr. Munger. My name is JC. I'm 15 years old, and I'm from Ohio. This is my 4th in-person Berkshire meeting. I have a lot of passion learning from your speeches, interviews, and articles. Thank you for sharing your wisdom all the time. Mr. Buffett, in your annual shareholder letter this year, you said that Berkshire's journey consisted of continuous savings, the power of compounding, the American tailwind, and avoidance of major mistakes. You have humbly admitted in the past that you have made many mistakes, but this is the first time that major mistakes stood out to me. Could you please advise us on what major mistakes we should avoid in both investing and in life? I would also like to have Mr. Munger's thoughts too, please. Thank you very much.
Well, Charlie said the major mistake you can make, then you're lucky if you're in the United States. If you go around the world, you don't have a lot of choices in some places, but you should write your obituary and then try and figure out how to live up to it. That's something you get wiser on as you go along. The business mistakes, you just want to make sure you don't make any mistakes that take you out of the game or come close to taking you out of your game. You should never have a night when you're worried about investing. I mean, assuming you have any money to invest at all, and you should spend a little bit less than you earn, and you can spend a little bit more than you earn, and then you've got debt, and the chances are you'll never get out of debt. I'll make an exception in terms of a mortgage on your house, but credit card debt, and we're in the credit card business big time, and the world will stay in the credit card business. But why get behind the game? And if you're effectively paying 12 or 14 or whatever percent you're paying on a credit card, you're saying I'm going to earn more than 12 or 14% of money. And if you can do that, come to Berkshire Hathaway. So it's I hate to say this when Charlie's around me, but it's straight out of Ben Franklin. I mean, and it's not that complicated, but I'll give you a couple lessons. So, Tom Murphy, the first time I met him, said, two things to me. He said, always tell someone to go to hell tomorrow. Well, that was great advice then. And think of what great advice it is when you sit down at a computer and screw your life up forever by telling somebody to go to hell or something else in 30 seconds and you can't erase it. And you haven't lost the option. And he said, praise my name, criticize my category. Well, what makes more sense than that? I mean, who do you like that criticizes you all the time? And you don't need to vilify anybody to make your point on subjects of discussion. And then they give you another general piece of advice. I've never known anybody that was basically kind that died without friends. And I've known plenty of people with money that have died without friends, including their family. But I've never known anybody. I've seen a few people, including Tom Murphy Sr., and maybe Junior, who's here, but certainly his dad. I never saw him. I watched him for 50 years. I never saw him do an unkind act. I didn't see him do very many stupid acts either. I mean, it wasn't that he was non-discriminating. He just decided that there's no reason to do it. And wow, what a difference that makes in life. Charlie?
Well, it's so simple to spend less than you earn and invest shrewdly and avoid toxic people and toxic activities and try and keep learning all your life, et cetera, and do a lot of deferred gratification because you prefer life that way. And if you do all those things, you are almost certain to succeed. And if you don't, you're going to need a lot of luck. And you don't want to need a lot of luck. You want to go into a game where you're very likely to win without having any unusual luck.
I'd add one more thought, too. You need to know how people can manipulate other people, and then you need to resist the temptation to do it yourself.
Oh, yes, the toxic people who are trying to fool you or lie to you, who aren't reliable in meeting their commitments. The great lesson of life is get them the hell out of your life.
Yep.
And do it fast. Do it fast.
And I would add, Charlie would totally agree with me, do it tactfully if possible, too. But do get them out of your life.
Yes, yeah, I don't mind a little tact. Or even a little financial cost, but the question is getting them the hell out of the life.
Okay.
So that's kind of the last point that I wanted to bring up here, and what I wanted to talk about was the way it's so funny to me to watch someone who's lived such a life as Warren Buffett has, obviously with all the success, with some of the mistakes that he's made and everything in between, but really the wisdom that he brings from things that he's learned. And one of the biggest things is to write your obituary and reverse engineer it. And really what he means is figure out at the end of your life, what do you want people to say about you? What do you want people to remember about you? How do you want to be remembered? Those kinds of ideas. And how do you get to that point? So if for you it's, I want to be remembered as the best president that's ever lived, how do you become president? How do you become the best president? If it's, I want to be a great financial asset manager, how do you do that? And the thing is like this idea of coming up with a long-term goal in your mind and kind of setting that from the beginning and coming back to it is one of the most important things, I think, not just in your own personal life, but as well as your business life and professional life as well. Like, what do you want people to think about you, and how do you act in such a way that other people will think that of you? So an example is, if your goal is, especially if you work in finance, is you want to be known as someone that can be trusted. You want to be known as someone that'll make a good deal and someone that's not going to screw you at any point in the future. You have to act in such a way where you're ethically sound enough that people begin to trust you, because trust is built and earned. It's not given automatically, or it shouldn't be, especially when money's involved. So if you're an asset manager, you need to figure out, how do I act in a way where, today's, actions and efforts will be reflected later on in the future as a success, or whatever the consequence may be, it's not going to reflect badly on me personally. A lot of people seem to take the instant, I'm going to get a fee. I don't care about this position anymore. I'm just going to, sell it to someone and be done with it. And I make my commission. Who cares about the client? That's a very bad way, because you're looking at short-term instant gratification, because you're going to get paid either way. Don't really care how your client's going to do or how the business is going to do, when in reality, the long-term goal is, what does that say about me as a person? How do I, how does my reputation reflect on others and what they think of me? And the key here is, if you want to act in a way where you're seen as honest, trustworthy, respectful, all that, positive notation, you need to act in such a way now so that people think about that to you later on, So again, writing your obituary now and reverse engineering it means just changing your life in such a way that it's geared towards, what do you want to be remembered as? And if it's, if it's being a nice parent, how do you be a good parent now? If it's being the best business person you can be, how do you do that now? And acting in an ethical way where you can do it over the long term. Because again, if you're taking short-term profits or you're making short-term changes or things that, in the short term is going to work, but long-term won't, you have to think of the outcomes of your decisions. And if I do this decision, what is going to be the good outcome? What's going to be the bad outcome? If it ends up turning out bad, what will happen to me? And if it's bad enough where, let's say, people leave you, people don't want to talk to you, people don't associate with you, maybe don't do that decision. But I feel like a lot of people don't remember that and think in very short term, one-line minded mindset. They don't think about the different outcomes. They just think about, oh, I'm going to get paid. And that seems to be kind of like a recurring theme in a lot of what Warren Buffett says, is being a long-term thinker in general, not just in finance, not just in your personal life, but in every aspect of your life, and delaying gratification and all the things that come with that. Now, thank you so much for joining me this year's worth of annual shareholder meeting. If you haven't actually seen it yet, go back and look at it. I really wish I could have gone this year. I'm maybe going to try to make it out next year. I'm really excited, though, to see what comes up of Berkshire throughout the year, and when their 13F filing comes out, I'll make sure to do a review of that along with everyone else. I've already seen a couple 13Fs have been trickling out, so it's getting around that time where everyone has to get theirs in, and normally Berkshire waits till the last day to get it in. So with that being said, though, thank you all for joining me today. Make sure to smash that like button as well as hit the subscribe button if you found this useful. I really hope you do, and I hope to see you in another video. Have a great day and happy investing.